mentioned, I'm here with Kevin Modesti, reporter for the Orange County Register and the Southern California News Group as well. Kevin has done just about everything there is to do, I think, maybe except take photos, but I think even then he's probably taken some photos in his day. But just a little bit about Kevin. Kevin covered the Super Bowl run for the Los Angeles Rams last season. He also covered the Kobe Shaq era, um, the Angels World Series, and USC football during the Pete Carroll era with a column he had at that time. He's also an alum at UCLA, as I mentioned earlier, and wrote for the Daily Bruin, covering some football, some basketball, and some baseball. And yeah, we'll talk more about Kevin's current project in a little bit later on here. He does have the game day newsletter, our daily newsletter. We'll dive deeper into that. But Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Good to talk with you, James.
Glad to talk to you. As I mentioned, we tried it last week, and some technical difficulties or some just technology nowadays. It's we're in 2022, but there's still some hiccups every now and then. But again, I'm excited to have you on. And you were out at the USC game, if I'm not mistaken, for the season opener. I guess we could probably start there because that was probably the most recent event you were at, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
That is correct. I was there. Yeah, I wanted to see the team uh, of the two major football teams, college teams around here, the one that probably people are expecting the most of this year.
Right.
And they were merely playing Rice. We knew that, but I guess they did about as much as they could to convince us that they might be for real.
Yeah, they had what was it, like 66 to 17? No, not even 17. It was like 60
Uh,
to 10.
66 to 14.
14. Okay, I wasn't giving them enough credit, but yeah, they had like three interceptions returned for touchdowns. Caleb Williams looked awesome and everything else. And we're not going to dive too deep into the game, but one thing for me that when I found out you were going, and I know you kind of touched on some of this in one of your more recent game day newsletters for the SoCal News Group, was just the atmosphere and wanting to check it out, like you said. And obviously, as someone who covers UCLA, I'm kind of familiar with all that's been going on over the past week in terms of attendance numbers for the Rose Bowl and UCLA. But what was it like inside at USC in that Coliseum? Obviously, there was the weather and everything else that was going on, but a lot of excitement coming into the season for that. What were some of your just key general takeaways from that trip to the Coliseum for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think people went into it wanting to see good things, right?
Mhm.
After a few years of disappointment. And again, it's a game where they were favored by 32 and a half. And I think over the last few years, the Trojans would have won a game like that by 14 points,
Yeah.
uh, and not by let me do the math quickly 52. And will allow for the fact that they had three pick sixes basically handed to them. So you know, a reality check says maybe it wasn't as one-sided as it looked on the scoreboard. But I found it encouraging that they didn't just eke out a win against a team they should trust. They really stepped on this opponent. So that was different, and I think the crowd was ready to see something like that, and maybe those of us in the press box were ready to see something like that. It'll get tougher.
Yeah. So to that point, yeah, they have a game against Stanford coming up. Stanford hasn't necessarily been the strongest team in the Pac-12 recently, but they have Corona Centennial alum Tanner McKee kind of leading the way at quarterback there. So we'll see how he does against one of his hometown teams in a way. But I'm just kind of curious. You covered some of the Pete Carroll era, and we're just going to be bouncing around with some topics here. But you covered the Pete Carroll era for USC, and
As a columnist, I should point out,
as a columnist. That's
not as,
correct.
not as a beat guy, but I
Thank
was
you. Thank
fortunate to be a columnist during a period when, as usual, a number of
Right.
LA teams were doing really well.
Yeah. Um, so two questions, but the first one is, was the crowd for the Pete Carroll, is that still kind of untouchable in terms of the attendance and the hype compared to maybe even what we're seeing now, or did
Oh,
you get,
yeah. I mean, uh,
is it
that,
just a
that,
different level, right?
yeah, that's that, uh, you know, let's check back at the end of the season
Right.
or maybe at the end of 5 seasons from now to see if there are any comparisons that are valid. But there's a long way to go to get to that point. That is the recent, bar, the recent
Right.
standard, I
That's
guess, for USC football. But it's better to have a high, even unattainable standard for your school than
it.
not.
Oh yeah. um, so with the UCLA attendance stuff that's been going on um at the Rose Bowl in terms of football games, one thing that I've been, trying to wrap my head around, or trying to get others, I think, more so to wrap their head around, I guess mainly me talking to myself in the car when I'm listening to sports radio recently,
Mhm.
but um, it's like, oh, people aren't showing up to the games. And I said, well, yeah, but you got the Rams in town now. You got the Chargers. The Dodgers are doing a lot better than what they have been in recent years. When there wasn't NFL teams kind of going on in the local area. There's just like a lot more going on. Would you say these NFL teams, the success of LeBron being it with the Lakers? I don't know if I mean, that's probably a success, but at least not on the court recently. But with the Dodgers being successful, the NFL teams, the Super Bowl run, do you think that impacts what's happening with the college level? Because back in, like, kind of like you were saying, the only NFL team, the only real show in town in terms of football was USC. Is that kind of now just in the background now because of everything else that's kind of going on and the new stadiums and everything?
Well, I think winning and losing is
Well,
going to
that.
be the biggest factor in people's interest. So
Mhm.
you get the interest you deserve, but in a town with what 12 pro teams,
Yeah.
there is a lot of competition. And if you slip, for a few years, and if the head coach in UCLA's case hasn't been inspiring confidence for the future, I get and then it's 180 degrees on the first Saturday of the season, and you're playing an overmatched opponent. You're going to get a low attendance. So I wouldn't read too much into that, other than to say it would have been a lot different if UCLA was coming off a string of winning seasons and had higher hopes even than it does this season. So. I don't know. You said you were talking to yourself in the car,
Yeah.
listening to talk radio. What were you saying to yourself?
Because it's it's just for me. It's kind of interesting because, like, you hear on Sirius XM, you hear it on the local stations here, and it's just like, it's not, even when there's national headlines, you're talking about Alabama and the Georgia Oregon game, and then it always kind of comes back to, did you see UCLA's attendance? And I'm just sitting in the car and I'm like, yeah, it was like that last year too for the opener when it was hot. It was an 11 a.m. kickoff. Like, it's just like it's the same topic from last year, and it's the same thing, and it's been like this. But it's just because they're that first game, and they showed the wide shot of the Rose Bowl, and it just doesn't look impressive. They've added some tarps. They're changing some things and trying to make an effort. But like you said, the on the field product has to be better than what it has been in the past, and I think they're making some strides in that direction. I just think it's kind of tough right now considering um, their three non-conference games aren't really anything marquee to drive people in to come watch, even if you're not a UCLA fan. So that's something they're working through. Obviously, a pretty good moment for them coming up this week, where UCLA, excuse me, will be hosting an HBCU. They're going to be having the band come to town for Alabama State. They're going to be having the football team, obviously, and it should be a good time. Again, I don't know if that's going to be enough to draw a bigger number for UCLA in terms of attendance, but at least they're gonna, for me, I think it's kind of crazy that USC, UCLA, and Notre Dame were among the three teams that weren't that didn't play an HBCU or I believe an FCS team ever. So UCLA is crossing their name off of that. I believe USC will be next. Will be doing that next year. But with that being said, and we'll jump into
Well,
the Rams here. Go ahead.
look, no, just one more point. You know, in a town that
Uh-huh.
has 15, pro and major college,
Yeah.
programs, um, somebody has to be 10th most
Yeah.
popular
Right.
at any one moment. And those things change, and they'll change again. And philosophically,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care that much about attendance. I don't care
Yeah.
that much about TV ratings. If there were only 20,000 UCLA football fans out there,
Mm-hmm.
and the true number is many, many, many times that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we would we would cover UCLA for the people who really care about it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
true of everything, right?
Yeah.
Including high school sports, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people there actually are who are rooting for Mater Dei, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
but the people who um, the alums and parents and everybody who does root for them deserve our best coverage, and a lot of us care about the big programs at any level in any sport
Mm-hmm.
because it's really interesting. So until I'm appointed a league commissioner or a network president, I'm not going to care too much about ratings and attendance. I'm just going to care about the people who care about it.
There's no doubt about it, and that's one of the things I love about what we do. Obviously, covering sports and being in journalism, is everyone has a story. All these teams, all these people, all these players, parents, communities have a story, and we're in the lucky position to where we're able to talk to those folks and we're able to have those discussions and help tell their story. And I think for
Mhm.
me, that's I wake up on with a smile on my face, knowing that that's my job every day. And Kevin, I would imagine you do as well. You do the game day newsletter for the Southern California News Group. It's something that you've taken on here. I believe it's been what has it been about a month or two now.
A little less than a month. Yeah,
A
still
little.
figuring it out.
You're still figuring it out, right? But isn't that what we're doing with life? Just trying to figure it out.
Absolutely. A month from now and a year from now, I'll still be figuring it out. The point to make there is that for people who thankfully are reading the newsletter, I welcome your suggestions and your requests for what you'd like to see in that every morning. And uh, and for anybody who isn't reading it yet, if there's something that would make such a thing attractive to you, let me know. My email is kmodesti@scng.com, and want to talk to people about that. Um, but your question was?
Yeah, no. So just to follow up there real quick with what Kevin was saying. So again, Kevin does a daily sports newsletter on all things kind of happening in Southern California, sports regarding everything from high school sports to college to pros. And it's a really good and thorough newsletter. I enjoy it, and I'm not just saying that because I work with Kevin, but because I open it up. Well, I don't wake up in the morning more often than not because I'm working the late night. But when I do wake up, it's one of the first things I'm going to see just to see what's going on to prepare myself for what I'm getting into for the day in terms of sports. And usually there's always a nice little surprise or two, something I wasn't expecting in the newsletter um, from Kevin. And again, he's going out to games and he's available. If you guys want to reach out to him, send him suggestions, your thoughts, different things like that. He has a lot of different segments in that newsletter. But again, so if you want to subscribe to that, make sure you guys go ahead, make sure you follow Kevin on Twitter, but also go ahead and check the link in his bio and he'll have that for you. Kevin, you are going to the Rams game tomorrow, right?
That is correct.
What is that they're supposed to be getting? They're playing the Bills, so I know Von Miller's supposed to be there, and just in general, the Rams. Aaron Donald and Stafford. Are they getting their rings, or are they? I think they got them already, right? So they're just doing the banner and the celebration, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
I think they've already gotten their rings in a some sort of private ceremony.
Mhm.
This will be the public celebration with banner raising, whatever else, and then on to the hard part.
Trying to do it again, huh?
Trying to do it again. Yeah,
That's right. So you're going with the newsletter on your mind, and that being like your main focus.
that's
What are
correct.
some? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's correct. Yeah, hopefully I'll have something to say about the game in the Friday morning newsletter. Have we sufficiently explained what we're trying to do with the newsletter?
No,
Um,
please
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. It for those who aren't familiar with the concept, it's an emailed newsletter
Hmm.
called Game Day with Kevin Modesti, and it's, we hope, another way for our newspapers to serve readers, in addition to the print newspapers, of course, but websites, social media, a lot of things I'm probably forgetting.
There's a lot of
But
stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there. You're gonna forget something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But newsletters are a way for us to communicate directly with people who've signed up for free on a topic of their interest. And in sports, we have newsletters for almost every team and sport
Yep.
in Southern California. This is a newsletter that's generally about Southern California sports and our coverage thereof, and trying to enhance people's enjoyment of sports and the coverage. And we have an ulterior motive. We want to point you to the best stuff in our newspapers on our websites. And if you're not already a subscriber, get you to subscribe. The newsletter itself, though, is free. And in addition to pointing you to what's in the paper and on the websites, I'm adding, in many cases, commentary.
Mhm.
In other cases, some discussion with our writers about a topic of the moment. James, you know that well because
Yep.
we did a Q&A. I asked you and Adam Grossbard questions about the then upcoming UCLA and USC football season. So it's a way to introduce readers to our writers. Eventually, I'd like to do the same thing with photographers, with editors, the people who are giving you the news, the sports news each day. It excites me to be doing this. For one thing, I've been in this business for a lot of years, and to find something that's truly new to do this deep into a career is kind of unexpected and exciting. But I also feel like I'm doing something that needed to be done, which
Right.
is in part to call attention to the good work that's being done in our newspapers. And by the way, occasionally other newspapers in town or websites when there are interesting things to be to have attention called to. Um, I grew up uh, as a kid sports fan, worshiping the heroes on the field, on the court, on the ice, on the track. Um, but living in a household that really appreciated newspapers and
Hmm.
journalism and writing, I quickly came to see the people who write about sports and take the pictures and write the headlines as heroes right up there with the athletes and the coaches, right? To be able to take the drama, all that life drama that's packed into a 3 hour game, right? And to be able to translate that into words and pictures in a newspaper under the pressure of deadline and space constraints and style constraints and of course ethical constraints and all of the things that we work within to do it. um, Man, I thought that's a real feat. That
Yeah.
takes real talent. And I guess that's how I wound up setting out to try to do that myself. And now to be able to appreciate what everybody does right now for all of these papers, and to try to call attention to it and celebrate it. That's what gets me up early in the morning to to finish off each day's newsletter.
No doubt about it. How does as someone again you've covered everything from sports to politics, editing, back into sports, et cetera, et cetera. How how what how has your mindset changed as you went to the USC game, as you get ready to go to the season opener here for the Rams? Like, how is your mindset? I mean, you're not having to write a story that day or that night, right? But like, how is your mindset or your thoughts, your vision, just the way you approach your coverage for a game like you will be here with the Rams? Like, what is the goal for you? What are you looking to take away from the game day experience?
For the newsletter, as opposed to
Yeah, and
as opposed to
daily beat
writing.
writing or columnist. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm happy to be able to take a bit of a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
Readers are probably aware of it, but it demands to be to be said that in the old days, pre-internet, a sports writer would watch, let's say, an afternoon football game
Mm-hmm.
and pay rapt attention to every play, and then go and do interviews, and then have some time to think, what's the story here, and then to write the story, right? And that got a little tougher on night games, but
Trust me.
um, eh, but now, because the internet wants your story immediately, we
Mm-hmm.
have the chance to get readers a story immediately and not just the next morning. um, you more than ever, you're writing as the game goes on,
Yep.
right? And so there's not that much of the sort of taking a deep breath when it's over. And the newsletter, strangely, is sort of back to the future or ahead to the past, where
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe I have the chance after that Rams game ends at whatever time it'll end, 8:30, 9 o'clock, to think about it, and to think, on a practical level, think about what is Gilbert Manzano
Mm-hmm.
writing about as the beat writer. What is Jim Alexander or Miriam Swanson writing about as a columnist, and play off them a little bit. I might try to amplify something that they write. I
Mm-hmm.
might disagree with something they write. I might try to put further context to something they write. Uh, might just try to point out why some little thing is really important from that game. We'll see. But as I said, I'm sort of figuring out the how to make the best use of the newsletter. Um, and I do know that so far, in less than a month, I've been able to write about USC, UCLA, Angels, Dodgers, the Otani MVP race, the Dodgers NL Cy Young candidates, prep football, uh, the, the Lakers, Pau Gasol,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
jersey number retirement, Orange County Soccer Club, and the questions about its future in Irvine. Wrote the other day about Flightline, the great
Yeah.
racehorse who ran a spectacular race at Del Mar that really deserves to be appreciated and put in perspective. And wrote about Serena Williams. Wrote about the sudden improvement of New York teams, at least in baseball, and what that means for us in Southern California. So, I've had a chance to cover a lot of ground already, and hopefully in various different ways. And hope to keep doing that. After 3 years of being essentially embedded with the LA Rams,
Yeah.
which
Just
I enjoyed, I mean, one of the joys, as you know, of sports writing is being there all the time,
Hmm.
as best we can, and just kind of learning about these fascinating subjects up close as they allow. um, but now I'm enjoying being able to spread out a little bit and try to hit to all fields.
Yeah, that's even for myself. I was like, as you were explaining a lot of that, I'm like, that's it's just a nice change of pace. It's just you're touching on a bunch of different stuff more so than just on one team, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. I know for me, I've been covering the UCLA football team the last couple of years, and I wasn't out there this year because I had a role. My role has changed a little bit over the last year or so, and so I'm watching the game at home, and it's barely like 1 o'clock by the time that game ends, and there's like 5, 6 other games I end up watching all in one day, and I'm like, wow, I don't remember being able. I haven't done that since like college or high school, being able to watch a game back to back to back that same way, especially on a Saturday for college football. I almost forgot there were other games that took place like that. And there was a slate of games on TV that will go all the way to midnight if Hawaii's playing. So that was a nice treat just to kind of just sit there, work, but also have the TV on. And I mean, I'm not really watching TV much nowadays, but being able to have the TV on and just have the crowds and the still have a sense of that college football environment there in my living room was pretty neat. And so I enjoyed being able to watch more than one game at one time. And Kevin, that's one of the more interesting things I've heard some people say recently. As we'll kind of st- wrap things up here in a minute, but even at the high school level, there's people who I've heard say they won't go. There's no need to go to a game because they can sit at home and they can watch 2 or 3 high school games at one time on
Mhm.
these different streaming services they have for the high school sports, whether it's the school or the district having a local station and they stream it on YouTube. There's so many different alternatives to watch stuff, not even at the pro and college level, but even at the high school level. So just the way the industry, the media, and just the way we're being presented, live game action is changed over the years, and it's just exciting. It excites me to know that it's going to continue to evolve, and whatever we think is convenient now, it they're going to try and find a way to make it even that much more convenient, and have us sit there and watch these games. But
Well,
again,
sports are entertaining more and more people
yeah.
as time goes on because they're able to reach people in more and more ways. That's the reason that the teams and leagues are making more money than they ever did. The reason
Mhm.
that players' salaries have thankfully multiplied. It's a lot different from the days when, if you wanted to watch the Dodgers, you had to go to Dodger Stadium,
Right.
right? And
Or
or
even,
wait for the 9 or 12 or 25 games that were on TV
right.
every year. It's yeah.
Even the sports betting perspective, you don't have to go to Vegas or find a place that is taking bets. You can do it on your phone and watch from your living room. Like even that, and that's kind of engaged people to watch the Browns and the Giants out here in SoCal. You know what I mean? Like no
Mhm.
one's really. You may not necessarily have a rooting interest in those teams, but now all of a sudden you do because you're betting on it or something. So it's pretty unique the way it's being presented to us nowadays and the options that we have. And I don't know, it's just an interesting time. And again, Kevin, you have the newsletter, and you're gonna have us covered on everything we need to know for the day, for the week, and keeping us up to date with where you're at. Again, as we kind of wrap things up here, is there anything that we missed or that you think we should be touching on in terms of our coverage, or what's next for you after the Rams game?
Well, we talked about how available sports are
Yeah.
uh, through television, through the internet now. I mean, this has been a trend and a topic for half a century now. People
Hmm.
can watch the game. Do they still need to read the newspaper?
Hmm.
And you know, I mean, the topic used to be the newspaper. Now it's, do you need to read the story online the next morning. I would submit absolutely. All the more reason to be reading a paper. I mean, anytime I watch a game, and this started when I was a kid, way before I had any idea of being in the newspaper business myself,
Mm-hmm.
I would go to a game and I would think, what are they going to write about this? What's the headline going to be the next day? What's the angle? And so often, and this is still the case, so often the story in the newspaper the next day is has more and is more interesting than the game itself was,
Yep.
because the writer is in the clubhouse and knows the stuff that happened and the things that are said that weren't evident as you watch the game on TV or at the stadium, right? Is able to put things in perspective and spin things ahead. Um, and I still think that you should be reading the paper the next day if you saw the game, and needless to say, especially if you didn't, right? Newspapers, and when I say newspapers, I certainly mean our websites as well. And I mean all of the ways that our writers and editors and photographers are communicating with people, in addition to those through social media, through newsletters, right? Through things like we're doing right here. Um, it's still the most for the least,
Yep.
right? The most content, the most coverage, the most insight that you're going to get for the least money and the least time invested. Um, and I mean, you're talking to somebody uh, who looks forward each morning to poring over the baseball box scores.
Mm-hmm.
On a
Mm-hmm.
single page in a newspaper, you have everything that happened in baseball yesterday in minute detail.
Yeah.
I dread the day when my newspaper, for some reason, eliminates box scores, because as convenient as everybody thinks the internet is, can you
Right.
imagine how many times you're going to have to be jabbing at keys on the internet to
Flipping. Yeah.
to go through
Tab. Tab.
15 box scores
That's
every
right.
day and get what you do out of it just with on one page? That's just, to me, an extreme example of the ways that newspapers kind of consolidate everything. And to I guess to circle back to what I was saying earlier about my early fascinations with reporters and photographers uh, and headline writers. You just marvel every day that you can pick up a newspaper or look at its website, and everything that happened yesterday
Yep.
in the world, however the world is defined for that newspaper's audience, is in there. It's a spectacular thing. So um, I wanted to touch on that. Read one of the 11 Southern California news group newspapers, and our websites, and you'll be better off for it.
No doubt about it. Continue to support local journalism so we can continue to give you local journalism and the coverage that you guys want and need. Great stuff from Kevin Modesti today. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me here on the space. Hopefully we get to do it again sometime in the very near future. Again, for those of you who are listening, maybe either live now or later on in the recording, make sure you guys go ahead and follow Kevin Modesti. I believe it's just your name at Kevin Modesti, and you can follow me as well, at JHW Reporter. We'll be giving you guys live coverage on Twitter of the various events we go to. And obviously, we'll have our write ups and our stories, and along with our other colleagues over at ocregister.com, dailynews.com, and everything else within our group. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. And I hope you guys have a good day. Thank you again so much, Kevin.
Thank you, James. Appreciate you doing this and everything you do.
Thank you so much, Kevin. You as well. You have a good one.